Hi, I'm Michael Wargo, team pilot with FMS, and today we're going to discuss the F-16C. This is a 70mm EDF, and this is going to be the first of a series that is designed to tell you literally everything you need to know before you ever fly this thing. If it's your first EDF, your first military EDF, or you're a really advanced pilot and you just want to know how this thing will perform, what it can do, and what you need to do to make it perform to its best, to its potential anyway. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to do it one section at a time. First, to make sure that your assembly process is perfect, here's the good news. This thing is insanely easy to set up and put together. It really just involved gluing on the vertical stab, putting on the wings, gluing on the horizontal stabs, and the skegs that are on the bottom. And a couple of quick clips, and that was it. The plane is basically set up for you. This one has the stabilization, the Reflex V2 in it. So setting it up is a breeze. Everything works right out of the box. Even the linkages didn't require very much adjustment. This might be for more of a beginner, but when you start to set it up, the only thing that may require some adjustment is that in order to have these sitting dead flat with the geometry of the servo arm straight up, you might have to, pull the ball link off, give it a couple of twists to make sure that it's level and doesn't require any trim. At the worst, it might require a tiny bit of sub trim on your radio, but for the most part, they should be good to go. The ailerons are on one channel, so you definitely have to make sure you adjust at least one side, because even sub trim won't, it doesn't do one at a time. You do, of course, have the option to do what I do normally, which is I set the ailerons up on two separate channels. Unfortunately, with the Reflex system, you need to have them on one channel. After you've got the thing set up, it does have armaments, these snap onto the wings. There's a couple missiles for the bottom that just snap right on. Another thing that I kind of like about this, and my advice to you, is to not store it with this on. Historically, after I have a plane with one of these, after a couple of months, it's normally hard plastic and they tend to, you bump it into something and they break. Just a precaution, leave this off. It snaps right on, it's magnetic, it's not a big deal. And, prevents a little bit of hanger rash and things like that. This one, fortunately, is rubber. I think it's a phenomenal idea. It does help you from keeping from breaking it. Like I said, this includes the Reflex V2. This system is literally, all the leads are already installed and everything is plugged in for you. Really all you have to do is plug in the rudder, plug in the ailerons to the connectors in here, and that's pretty much it. So everything is literally turnkey. All right, this section is about what to expect on takeoff. This is what to expect before you actually fly it. This field is grass, as you can probably see. When it's wet, when it's a little high, the 70mm, regardless of how fast this is and how maneuverable and how easy it is to get it to climb and things like that, in order to get off the ground, this thing still needs to rotate. It really needs to have enough speed. On a concrete runway or anything like that, it's absolutely no problem. But on grass, it sometimes, because the wheels are relatively small, F-16s generally have a bad habit and they all do because the gear are very narrow. They'll tip over if you make a sudden turn going slow or something like that. So this is just something to be aware of. When you're making turns, slow down and don't crank that rudder over too hard too quick because you'll tip it. Usually not a big deal. It tends to right itself pretty quickly, but it's definitely something to look for when you're on the ground. If the field is too wet and you're going to maiden the airplane, don't do it. If the grass is too high, don't do it. If you see the aircraft is having trouble leaving the ground, stop and do it another day. This field is a perfect example because on the right day, it won't come off the ground, especially if my battery's not really delivering a lot of amps or something like that, because the high grass, the wet conditions can just slow it down. So be careful, because leaving the ground with very little power is really dangerous, especially on the maiden flight, which I always recommend that you make its first flight with the reflex system off, to be able to trim the aircraft properly. When you are on a hard runway or a smooth surface runway, this thing will have absolutely no trouble. It gets to flying speed in just seconds. It's not a problem whatsoever. With most of the aircraft, I kind of recommend that you just let the aircraft lift off by itself. With this one, my suggestion is to just add this tiniest bit of elevator, but don't pull back hard because it will have a pretty ugly takeoff. But this one isn't as likely to just lift off as some of the other ones that we'll be doing in the future, you know, like the A10, things like that. They just want to just kind of rise off the ground. My recommendation for this plane, from setting your rates and things like that, is going to be pretty simple, and it's pretty standard for me. But what I like to do is I like to set a rate that is high rates, that is as much as you can go in every direction. We'll set the travel to max, and then set the expo relatively high. That means it's very soft on the center and should fly just like your low rates on the center of the stick. I've got a lot of videos on how to set rates. If you look up Michael Wargo and rates or things like that, or travel or setup, you'll find it. I also have a setup guide out there that shows you how to set all these things. But for right now, I set it with one high rate with enough expo to make sure it's very soft on the center. The second one is for when we're flying high speed, but we want nice quick performance. Okay, if we do that, it enables me to do, you know, relatively quick point rolls and things like that, which this rate ailerons are at the same rate as the high rate, and that's the trick. Rudder on this aircraft isn't that critical. I think you should fly it on high rates at full with a fair amount of expo. That's also good for taxiing on the ground. The critical part for this rate is going to be the elevator, because you don't want it to be going like this. Once you start going fast, you have to tone down the rates to make sure it flies nice and smooth and that you look smooth. The beautiful thing about flying these jets and trying to make them look like a big jet is to set the rates fairly calm, so you always look like the plane's a little bigger than it is. I always use the expression, you know, fly it big. Big maneuvers, nice, slow, deliberate turns. It just makes the plane look fantastic in the air. And this thing just handles like a dream. It's a really beautiful flying aircraft. And then, of course, I set a low rate. That is if I'm flying really fast and I want to do nice, big maneuvers, I'll fly on a low rate. The truth be told, I almost never fly on the low rate. I like that snap rate because I like a little extra control. So as you're setting it up, set it up for whatever you like, and the plane will absolutely perform well. If you have enough expo and you use it the way you're supposed to, which is just keep it nice and smooth on the center. Now we're going to fly the model. My suggestion for this, and you'll probably see this repeated in video after video, is especially with a jet like this. You know, nothing looks worse than seeing an EDF like this just jabbing around and moving real fast, and it's really jerky. It just makes everything look ugly. Small maneuvers, fly it as smoothly and deliberately as possible, and this thing flies beautifully. I don't mean beautifully, I mean it flies fantastic. It looks amazing flying slow because F-16s, the nose likes to rise as it gets slow. And in some of the video you've seen or are going to see in this video, you'll see that I flew so slow that we literally were able to catch the thing out of the air. That means, and I did that without the flight stabilization. That means the plane will just slow down, the nose will go up in the air, and the wings stay rock steady. This plane does not need flaps. It does not have them, and as you can see in the landings, again, the nose comes nice and high and does not need flaps. So as you're flying around, understand that this plane is really controllable. At high speeds, low speeds, it's pretty resistant to stalling. If this is your first or second EDF or something like that, the whole purpose of this video is to make certain that you have a good experience. We don't want you to crash it. We want you to really enjoy this model. And with EDFs, especially small ones, my top two big pieces of advice are keep it a little closer. You don't have to fly it 1,000 feet away. And the other part is you always need to power into the turns. Where most pilots get in trouble is they're coming up to a turn, they pull a little elevator, start rising a little bit, which slows the airplane down, and then they cut the power because they're making a turn. They feel that it gives them a little control. It's the opposite with an EDF. As you're getting into a turn, you need to power into the turn to give it what it needs. And if you take off the throttle and at the same time you rise a little bit or turn hard. Remember, if you turn hard, you're just literally removing all your airspeed. And once you level off, you're not going fast. You better have some throttle on. This one's a bit more forgiving than most, but still, when you're flying a jet, always power into the turns. It's a great idea, and I'm telling you, through the life of your flying, it will save you a few airframes over the years. I promise you that. Okay, it's extremely windy out, but I'm going to just take it up, do some nice normal flying, and just kind of give you a little idea of how well this thing flies under just very normal conditions and flying it that way. Well, you can see the wind just really affecting this thing. Boy, it's getting a little hard to see, Tommy. All right, this plane doesn't require much space even though it's an EDF. They're very nice to fly low and in tight. You can see the wind is very extreme right now. It's kind of a little silly to fly, but we're here. You can see it handles beautifully. Plenty of power. Nice big maneuvers always look really nice. A little tip for all EDFs. Give the battery a break once in a while. You know, just cut the power. Let it cool down. It's very tempting to run it hot all the time, but it's very damaging to the battery. You know, something this plane does as good as any I've ever seen is just nice, low, slow passes. You know, looks really nice low to the ground. One of my favorite maneuvers with the F-16, and of course this does it just perfectly, is to bring it in low, and then when you peel off and make that first turn, keep it low. Looks absolutely beautiful against the backdrop. Got it? Very nice straight lines. It's a really nice flying little jet. A little hard to see with the gray skies on the other side. Landing is, obviously it's not an optional part of any flight. So knowing how to land this is as crucial for this plane as it is any other. My suggestion, as it is with all of them, and if you're unfamiliar with the entire sequence of landing, do a quick search for Michael Wargo landing tips, and I have some really good ones on why and how you do every little part of my landing routine and why it's important. But my suggestion for landing this is, whatever you do, avoid coming straight down and landing like this. It's never a good idea. No full-scale pilot will ever land like this. It doesn't make sense for models either. I have videos on landing turbine jets and everything else, and in every single case, when you're directly across from you, when you're on your downwind run, it's important that the plane is low. Not really low, but low. Because remember, when you come down, that altitude turns into airspeed, and you'll end up landing too fast. And that's a huge mistake that pilots make time and time and time again. I see it every time I fly. There's very seldom I go out to a field and somebody doesn't land that way and end up landing too fast and bouncing down the runway or something. You can avoid this permanently, like it will never happen to you again. If you set up across from you, slow the aircraft down. You don't need to be flying fast. Just fly fast enough to keep the plane airborne with a little control and a little speed, because we're going to bleed off the rest of the speed down on the corner. Fly far away from yourself. The longer the approach, the more able to adjust the speed coming in and the altitude that you have. So, it's pointless to be so high that, how and where you land isn't your choice. It becomes the airplane's choice. Okay? If I do a nice long approach, if we scan over to the end of the runway, by the time I hit the end of that runway, I only want to be 6 to 10 feet up. And that means if I choose to land it directly in front of me, I mean directly in front of me, okay? I can watch it come in, and now I'm getting 2 feet off the ground. The nose will start to rise. I can add a little bit of power, and I can just drive it to the spot that I want to put it down. The key to a good landing is letting the plane get low enough that it just falls out of the sky. It just doesn't want to fly anymore. In that case, you'll never bounce the plane down the runway. Coming in too fast is a big mistake. So get over the runway, you're 6 feet, drop it down to that 2 foot range if you can, 2 or 3 feet. and then let it down easily. And don't be in a hurry to let it touch down. It's not necessary. It will come down. I mean, unless you're absolutely running out of runway, there's no reason not to just let it come down easily. And if you are running out of runway, go around. My last little tip for landing is, especially the first time you land it, land with plenty of battery the first time. And if you come in, you realize you're a little fast, go around. Don't try and salvage a bad approach. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing if you really sit and think about it. And I watch it happen all the time. It's a bad approach, but well, I'm already low, I might as well just drop it to the ground. And although I'm sure every one of you have pulled it off a few times, you know, you're at 50-50 risk of doing some damage to your airplane for absolutely no reason. So go around, land it again. Okay, on its maiden flight, I was not smart enough to use the battery wisely, and I had to belly land it in the field because I ran out of juice. So we're going to show a landing here. As you can hear, the wind is severe, and I think it's a good chance to show how nicely it handles into the wind, and so on and so forth. So we'll do a nice, high alpha landing with crazy high winds, and it's a bit of a crosswind, so you'll see how nicely this thing handles. All right, we're out quite far and doing exactly what I preach all the time. We're going to fly it nice and slow, keep the power on. Last but not least, for advanced pilots and things like that, is regardless of how many cool or crazy things you can do with it, you still never look like you can fly very well if you don't fly smoothly and make really nice, slow, deliberate maneuvers. The way to fly this thing, I am certain, is to fly it smooth. Make sure you have enough expo so all your turns and everything like that look really good. Because if you fly nice, smooth turns, nice, large maneuvers, this plane looks absolutely incredible in the air. And it'll make your flying look better too. Not least, of course, my favorite part is for advanced pilots to really get the most out of this thing. My job as a team pilot is to kind of push the planes to their limit, and try and see just what's possible. And in an effort to do so, I broke another one of these pretty good. I just try and see how low I could get it to go. I caught the tail on the ground and landed it inverted. We also were trying to see just how slow I can slow it down, and by grabbing the airplane, we kind of cracked a wingtip and some things like that. So in an effort to save you the trouble, I showed you just how slow this thing will go. And in the video where we were driving that slow, there was literally no wind. With a little bit of a headwind, it'll slow down even more. So that's the interesting part. So in order to show you the limit, I wish somebody would have showed me the limits. When you see the limit of the air getting close to there, that means don't fly it any slower, keep pushing, and the aircraft will stay airborne and the wings will stay stable. What I did find out is my assumption was inverted, I could fly it just as slow. I'm going to save you the trouble of crashing it. Don't fly it too slow inverted, because the inverted Harrier on this particular one, and I've seen F-16s, some larger ones, that I could slow it down inverted, it seemed just as much, or almost as much. But this wasn't quite as happy inverted. So you got to keep the speed a little more than it was upright Harrier. Personally, I really love doing those inverted Harriers with jets. They look so cool, but just be very careful. Its flying and handling while the plane is inverted is just spot on. So that's definitely not anything to worry about. As long as you set the CG properly, if you're going to do a lot of Harrier and inverted Harrier, I do not like the concept of flying an unbalanced plane, like something a little tail heavy. But if that is your goal, to keep this thing as slow as possible, it actually does perform a little better with the CG back. So you can bump it back a little bit just to make sure that it likes to sit up in that condition. All of the discussion I gave on how it likes to land like this, if you're nose heavy, it won't quite want to do that. It's also a little harder to get the plane to rotate for takeoff, especially on higher grass. So just keep that in mind. For advanced pilots, I flew almost everything with the stabilization system off. The plane is so stable, you just don't need it. And it's wonderful on landing. It's wonderful on trying to fly nice smooth maneuvers, nice smooth lines, really nice low passes. The stabilization system is awesome. I mean, it keeps the plane smack right where it belongs. I didn't do it on any of my low passes, but the stabilization really works. I mean, it's a really, really good system. Just take advantage of it. Use it when it's of benefit. And if you're trying to fly, super slow, do the Harriers and things like that, the elevator is more responsive without it, and so is the ailerons. Again, for really advanced pilots, if you want to fly the toughest maneuvers with stabilization, my suggestion is to bypass the stabilizer on your elevator and run the elevator direct, and just make everything else stabilized, because stabilized ailerons just make the flights look better. I flew it stock, but if I was flying a show and I wanted to just really fly to my potential and everything, I'd bypass the elevator function, just to have as much control over, setting that high nose and stuff like that. And I thought the plane was more responsive, because flight stabilization can very much dull the sticks a little bit, so be aware of that. My favorite maneuvers with this are the long, slow rolls, and and point rolls and things like that. I do have a mix that I put in for the point rolls, and I will show you what it is. Basically, as the plane is going into the point rolls, its tendency to roll in or out needs to be mixed out. And once you get it, it really does well. Unlike some jets, this one does not necessarily like to hold knife edge. It needs a little more rudder, and again, it just doesn't want to stay on knife edge. The mixes help, but it's still something that, those really nice low knife edge passes that you see, you won't see with this, because it just doesn't like it. I think it needs a little more rudder to be able to really do that well. For advanced pilots, or people really wanting to do some nice experimental stuff and really try and just absolutely push this thing to its limits. Tom, zoom in here. I'll show you what I've done. Well, first of all, I had to cut one of the leads going to the elevator and cut one of the leads going to one of the ailerons so I can separate them. I bypassed the flight control system. I had to solder on 2 new plugs to go into the servo, or into the receiver. I now need at least a 7-channel receiver to do this, but I have the elevators on a separate, each elevator on a separate channel, ailerons on a separate channel, and I've done a bunch of really, what I think are really clever mixes and valuable mixes, okay? First of all, we have normal flight. You see everything set up properly. Ailerons, elevators going the correct way. Now, I have one mix, when I mixed with this switch, that combines the elevator and the ailerons. I put the ailerons in the deep flap position with full elevator, to help bring the nose up and create a pretty interesting flight characteristics that are not available in normal flight. So this switch is very easy to access, so I did that. I also have another mix. If I push this, I have the elevator and the ailerons mixed. So I have an aileron elevator mix, which is going to take the roll rate and make it just crazy fast. It might even be insanely fast. It might be a little too fast, but you know, I can always adjust it. So now I have mixes that if I want to, you know, mix in the elevator and the ailerons, or the ailerons in the elevator, and I think it's going to create some very interesting flying. I have also mixed on my flap switch flaperons. So what's going to happen is, in the center position, I am going to have flaperons, which means I can land with, you know, with more high alpha and so on. Then on the other side, full down, I have spoilerons, and we're going to see how it flies and check it all out. But I just wanted to push this thing to the limits and see exactly what this thing is capable of doing. I'm not kidding. Let's try our first mix. Oh wow, nice. Wow, look how vertical with this mix. All right, here we go. Okay, this is the elevator flap mix. Watch the vertical authority. Wow, very, very cool. Definitely something you won't be able to do without the mix. Now I'm going to flip it inverted. Again, much tighter than would ever be normal. Look at this. Now we are going to hit our aileron elevator mix. Yeah, that increased its roll rate. That is crazy fast. Well, if you want some increased performance, I think we hit on something pretty cool.